Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife decided to spend the evening with a man she did not know. Did she stay the night with him or not? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. It was the usual winter season, rainy for Halloween, gray and dreary for Thanksgiving, light snow for Christmas, and cold and windy for New Year's. Finally, Valentine's Day was approaching, and Jane and I were going to have a nice evening of it. As in Robert Burns's poem To a Mouse, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. On this special day, we woke up to 2 inches of snow outside, and it looked like it was continuing to snow. By midday, a foot had fallen, and everything started to close down. Linda had picked up the kids before I did, so when I got home, I knew our Valentine's date was canceled. "Linda, even if we can't go out, why don't you show me your new dress that you were going to wear?" "Jim, you know the conditions." "You will only see it when you take me out on a date," said Linda. In high school, Linda loved to sew. She enjoyed making her own clothes, and when Emma was born, she enjoyed sewing for her. Anyway, she had a new dress, and I wanted to see it, but it didn't work out. So, we changed out of our work clothes into comfy sweatshirts and spent the evening with the kids. They canceled work for everyone except essential staff, so we had 3.5 days off. Believe me, I think I can recite every word from Frozen. We've watched it so many times. Emma, with Tommy on her tail, stood in front of us and said, "Mom, Dad, this was the best weekend of my life." They both climbed onto our laps and hugged us. We hoped it would never end. The streets were clear on Sunday, so we were back at work on Monday. The weather changed again, and the thaw began, but I was glad that February was leaving. On Monday evening, just as we were about to get comfortable, Linda's phone rang. She looked at the display and then said she needed to answer. She stood up and walked across the room, her expression turning into a big smile. When she hung up, she came up to me and said it was Dee, and she said that since this month had been so dull and there was an extra day in February this year, we should celebrate its end by going out and saying goodbye to it. February falls out on Friday the 29th. We could book rooms in Madison, have dinner at their restaurant, and then go down to a club down the street that one of Dave's coworkers says is a lot of fun. There's a band there on Fridays, and if we're staying in Madison, admission is free. Isn't that a nice way to say goodbye to the month? Phil and Jane said Mrs. Porter would watch their 2 children, and she said she'd be happy to sit with ours too. We'll pick them up on Sunday on our way to Mom and Dad's, so we'll have 2 nights of fun, one in Madison and one at home. I wanted to play with her a little to see if I could get a little more out of the experience, but her pouting lips and pleading eyes made me give up. "You know I'd do almost anything for you, darling. Of course we can go." Though with less than 2 weeks left to plan, we had to organize everything very quickly. We made a reservation. Dee took care of the restaurant and club reservations. Linda's worry made me worry too. I could never turn down the opportunity to spend time with my beautiful wife on February 29th. Friday, we both left work early and went home to get ready. We packed the kids' bags and sleeping bags in the car, along with our clothes for a change and a bag for the drive home on Saturday. We drove up to Mrs. Porter's and left the kids there, then drove to Madison. We agreed to meet in the lobby at 6 p.m. Dee made a dinner reservation for 6:30 p.m. We changed in our room, and when Linda came out of the bathroom, I was left speechless. The dress she wore was a vision of beauty. It was cobalt blue, a color that made her eyes glow. It hugged her waist and flared out from there, ending just above her knees in waves. The top was tight, showing just enough that she couldn't wear a bra. She wore the leather necklace I bought her for our 3rd anniversary, with cobalt stones to match the dress. Her earrings followed the same theme, leather with a cobalt stone dangling from her earlobe. As she moved, the earrings moved almost in time with the waves of her dress. My dark blue suit matched her dress well. We looked at the time and headed into the hall. As soon as the elevator doors opened, she pushed me out and told me that she had forgotten something in the room and that she would be back soon. I walked over to where everyone else was standing, and we waited for her. The next time the doors opened, she walked out like she owned the place. Every eye in the hallway was on her, but her eyes were only on me. I never realized she was so vain. We sat down and all decided that we would eat something light. We could always order something at the club. Conversation around the table was light, and there was a lot of laughter. When dinner was over, we put on our coats and walked to the club. Dee had booked a table for us in the 20s. It was a good thing she did because the club was filling up quickly. We sat down and all ordered drinks. The fun was everything we hoped it would be. Linda and I weren't very good dancers, but we could hold our own. We did a couple of fast dances and a couple of slow ones. My favorite was when she was spinning. The dress spread out and made her even more attractive. As the evening progressed, we ordered a couple of plates of wings to keep the alcohol from affecting us too quickly. I ordered them right before our last dance, and they arrived just as we got back. I was feeding Linda when someone from our group shouted, "You need a number." Everyone had a good laugh about it. Dave stood up and approached Linda, asking her to dance. We often danced with other company members at parties. "Sorry, Dave, but all my dances are reserved for Jim today," she said. "Damn lucky guy tonight, and oh, how happy you will be," she replied. Another burst of laughter ensued. Then we heard a noise at another table. Emma looked over and Jane said, "Isn't that Mark Lavalier over there?" Everyone agreed that it was him, but Linda and I were the least interested. Mark Lavalier was a tight end for our city's professional football team. Unlike most players, he preferred to live here all year round rather than somewhere else in the country. This, and his charity work, have made him an even bigger legend here. I looked Linda in the eye and said, "Are you ready to go to our room? You just ordered that plate of wings. We should eat them because we're going to need energy for tonight." Suddenly, Dee said, "Look, he's coming here." Everyone froze, and from behind Linda, we heard, "I'm Mark Lavalier." "Would you like to dance, Linda?" Linda let go of my hand, turned to look at him, and simply extended her hand. She stood up and followed him onto the dance floor. Dave said, "I thought you said all your dances were reserved for Jim." Now I'm really jealous. This caused another burst of laughter from everyone except me. She followed him onto the dance floor as if she were in some kind of trance. They did their dance, and when I thought she would come back, she stayed on the floor. I was about to get up, but Jane grabbed my hand and said, "It's just a dance, Jim. Give it to her this time." I relaxed, but this time turned into a third, then a fourth. The band leader, who seemed to be taking direction from Lavalier, began a slow melody next. Linda pressed herself against his body as if he belonged to her. When the second slow tune started, I stood up again, but this time Dee grabbed my hand and held it tightly. "It's just for one night, Jim." "Leave it alone," she said. Her words confused me. I thought she was talking about dancing. Lavalier lowered his face to Linda's and whispered something to her. She looked up and nodded. Lavalier looked at the band leader, nodded his head, and when the song ended, Linda returned to the table. When she returned, I whispered in her ear, "Is it time for us to take the next dance to our room?" She didn't answer. She was about to sit down when Dee announced, "Sorry guys, I just need to go to the bathroom." "Now, Linda, come with me, okay?" "Sorry, Jim, I need to freshen up too." She got up and left without answering my question. Of course, the conversation immediately turned to why can't a woman going out in public go to the bathroom herself? I was just beginning to wonder why my friends tried so hard to keep the conversation going when Dee came back alone. "Dee, where's Linda? Is she okay?" "Relax, Jim," Dee said, smiling. "She's fine, she just has things she needs to do." Our friends started teasing me, "You don't have to worry, she's a grown woman, you know." I waited about 10 minutes, and when she still didn't come back, I stood up, took the empty plate of wings, and headed to the bar. I approached one of the barmaids, "Sorry, but my wife went to the toilet about 15 minutes ago and hasn't come back. She never stays that long. Could you please check if she's okay?" The bartender looked at me like I had a third eye. As I looked at the empty plate and said, "The wings were great and she likes spicy food, but she gets a reaction every now and then." "Really? I just want to know what's wrong." "She's fine. She's 53 and has brown hair," a voice behind me said. "She's fine. No need to check on her." It was Dee looking at the bartender. "She's okay. I'll take care of it." I wondered why the bartender was looking at me with sympathy and turned around, returning to the bar. "Where is she, Dee?" She went to the bathroom with you, and now I don't know where she is. Let's go to the back of the bar where there's more privacy. She pulled me to the side where we were alone. She looked me in the eye and said, Jim, Linda loves you. She loves you and the kids more than anything in this world, and always will. And you know it. But tonight, she's spending the night with Mark. So on our special night, she left me for some nerdy jock. I looked at Dee angrily as I said, Jim, she didn't leave you. She will come home to you tomorrow, and you will have many more special nights together. She couldn't even tell me to my face that she was leaving. She just snuck out the back door. Jim, listen to me. She didn't leave you. Well, if she didn't leave me, then where is she now? Obviously not with me, right? I spoke louder and didn't care who heard. Please calm down, there are eyes on you, Dee said. Look, I know this hurts you, but it's just for one night. Linda knows, we all know, that you're the only man for her and always will be. You're a good guy. I couldn't take her condescending tone anymore. I turned and headed back to the table. As they approached, everyone fell silent. Dee sat down, and I remained standing, looking around the table. I saw everyone avoiding eye contact a little too loudly. When our little group first started getting together, we all talked about the sanctity of marriage. Until recently, you all and Linda agreed that infidelity was a once-and-for-all thing. I didn't lead the conversation. I didn't even think it needed to be discussed tonight. You all became Linda's conspirators in her once-and-for-all, Dave said. But Jim, this is Mark Lavalier, Dave. How would you feel if Dee left without even saying goodbye? How would you feel if you had to go home and tell your children that their parents were getting a divorce? Oh wait, you don't have kids to feel the consequences, Dee said. Jim, calm down. Linda will come home tomorrow, and everything will be fine, Dee continued. Open your mouth again, and I'll knock your teeth out, okay Jim? You can't talk to my wife like that, Dave threatened. Then run there and bring my wife back and give him yours. Everyone sat in stunned silence. They had never seen me in such a state. Once I leave this table, you are all dead to me. Never try to talk to me. If you see me on the street, turn and run the other way. You won't like the outcome. I took a $20 bill out of my wallet and threw it on the table. That should cover me. You can all pay for Linda. I grabbed my coat and saw Linda's coat still hanging where hers had been. I silently said, screw this, and walked away. It was a lonely walk back to the hotel. Would I find them there, or just an empty room? When I reached the door, I realized it was dark inside, so I opened it and entered. There was a set of red and black lingerie on the bed, which must have been what she came back to put away. I looked at the clock, it was only 10:30 p.m., and my world had collapsed. I picked them up and threw them in the trash, changed out of my suit, gathered our other things, and headed for the door. When I got to the front desk, I went to check out. The clerk looked worried, so I assured her that something important had happened and that the room was perfect. She smiled again and wished me good night. I called Mrs. Porter and told her that something had happened, and I would come pick up the children. She sounded worried, but I assured her everything was fine. They were sleeping, so I carried them one by one and buckled them into their car seats. When we got home, I carried them into their bedrooms, and they never knew they were home. On Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, the children got up and started looking for us. They found me on the sofa in the living room. Dad, why are you here? Mom and I had a little fight, that's why I ended up here. Well, just tell Mom to be nicer to you. Before I could say anything, they were already running up the stairs and down the hallway toward the bedroom. A few moments later, they returned to the living room. Dad, Mom isn't there. Well, I'm sure she'll show up soon. I gave them breakfast. When they finished, they came back and climbed in with me, each on one side. While they were eating, I knew what was coming next, so I already loaded Frozen into the DVR. I looked at my watch, it was almost 1 p.m. When we heard a car pull up to the entrance, before I could stop her, Emma ran to the window, peered through the curtains, and looked outside. Her head dropped, and she looked like she had just lost her best friend. The front door swung open, and Linda walked in, wearing her blue dress. Jim! 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 I'm home! She sounded the same as she always did when she returned from shopping trips. She closed the front door and turned on the light. Emma stood there in front of her, hands on her hips. Linda suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom, where were you? And why were you kissing that man?" Linda froze. She looked up and saw me and Tommy, but not a word came out of her mouth. "Well, Mom, answer me." Finally, she found her voice and screamed, "Emma, take your brother and go to your rooms. I'll talk to you later." Both children were shocked and scared and ran up the stairs to their rooms. She looked at me and said, "Why are they here?" "Well, Linda, they live here." "When did you bring them home last night?" "I didn't want to be alone." "Why didn't you stay in Madison?" "Good question. Maybe because in one moment, my life stopped. I thought if I'm going to die, it's better to be here with my children than in some hotel alone." "And why did you think you were going to die?" "Because the man I loved and thought I'd spend the rest of my life with threw it all away for some cheap thrill." "Did you and Mr. Superstar have fun laughing at the cuckold you left behind?" "What are you talking about?" "I didn't leave you, and I'm here right now." "Where did you spend last night?" "At Mark's house." "Where were you supposed to be?" "Well, I should have been with you, but Jim, I had a once-in-a-lifetime chance and I couldn't pass it up." "Well, you should call him and ask him to come get you because your once-in-a-lifetime cost you what you thought you'd have forever." "I'm going to see a lawyer on Monday. I'll be asking for custody of the children. I don't think I can trust you with them." "Jim, stop it. We won't get a divorce, and you won't take my kids." I put your things on your bed, and I gathered all my things and moved them to the computer room. "I need to leave now and go to the store. I need to buy a few things." I stood up and walked past her, heading into the garage. She tried to call out to me, but I didn't listen. I drove to the Walmart across town and bought a single bed frame, a cool gel mattress, a single bed set of sheets, 2 pillows, 6 plastic containers, and a door lock. For a $100 lighter, I returned to the garage and began setting up my new living quarters. "Jim, where's my set of underwear that I took to Madison?" "I threw it in the trash in my room." I didn't need reminders of your deception. As I hauled things into the home office, Linda asked what I was thinking of doing. It was pretty stupid after her outburst last night. Once I had everything laid out, I started putting everything back together. First the bed frame, then I let the mattress breathe while I changed the lock. After I put my clothes in containers and made my bed, I noticed that it was already 5:30 p.m. I went out, closed the door, locked it, and went to look for the children. They were both in Emma's room, huddled together on her bed. "Hey, have you guys eaten yet?" They both shook their heads in response. "Where would you like to go?" It's been a running joke in our house since Linda and I first started dating. On our first date, we went to Wendy's, so both kids yelled, "Wendy's! Put on your shoes and jackets, and let's go." They were ready in no time. I decided that we would go inside for lunch. When we finished and were getting ready to go, Emma asked, "Are you going to buy anything?" "Not this time, princess. You can cook yourself something if you get hungry." We got back into the car and were soon home. Linda wasn't in the living room, so I asked the unfortunate question. "So, what do you want to do?" Unanimously, they replied, "Watch Frozen." "Okay, let's take a bath first and then get Frozen." They instantly rushed and plunged into the bath. I helped them wash their hair, then dried them and dressed them in their pajamas. We wrapped ourselves in a blanket and started watching the movie. Both kids fell asleep about 3/4 of the way through the movie. I waited until the movie was over before moving them. Linda never emerged from the bedroom. I walked around the house, making sure everything was closed, went into my new room, and checked my email and Facebook page. The email contained all the usual stuff, but there was a private message on my Facebook asking me to check out Jane Freeman's Facebook page. Jane outdid herself by talking about Friday night. She managed not to mention a single name, but that doesn't mean others reading her story didn't want to throw in their 2 cents. A woman I didn't know commented on this, giving names to the whole incident. Then came the insults. I was called a cuckold and a loser. Linda was rated even worse. I won't say that I now disagree with these names, but it still hurts to hear her called that. I stopped and thought about what my future would look like, even if I got rid of this cheater. In any case, I would be considered a cuckold. I decided to make my own post to help ease the pain a little. So I typed it in and corrected it until it was right. Hello, Facebook fans. On Friday night, my wife decided to put me in my place. We went out with a few friends for what was supposed to be a farewell party to February, which we won't miss. Everything was arranged for a stay at one of the best establishments. On Friday night, we had a wonderful dinner at their restaurant and then went to the club down the street. We had a drink and ordered wings. We danced and looked into each other's eyes, saying little words of love through them. You couldn't ask for anything better. Then some idiot came and ruined our little evening. You may know him, he's a local hero and all, Mark Lavalier. He came to our table, stood behind my wife, and said, "I'm Mark Lavalier, would you like to dance?" He didn't even ask me if she could. No, this idiot immediately turned to my wife. She didn't even look at me, she just got up and went with him. They danced 4 fast dances, and then the orchestra began a slow melody. I tried to get up and intervene, but one of the women in our group stopped me. They started a second slow dance, and he leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She looked into his eyes and nodded yes. When the song ended, she began to return to the table, and the idiot disappeared. I asked her if she was ready to go so we could end our date, but she gave me a strange look and never answered. My girlfriend, or so I thought, announced that she needed to use the toilet and asked my wife to accompany her. They left and never returned. I waited for a while and then went to ask the staff if they could check on her. A voice behind me, one I knew all too well, said there was no need, she was in good hands. She informed me that my wife, the mother of our 2 children, would not be home that night, she had a better offer. Back at the table, all my so-called friends told me how lucky I was because Mark Lavalier chose my wife out of all the women in the club. I didn't feel happy. I left the club, telling my now former friends that they were dead to me, just like my soon-to-be ex-wife. If you're reading this, I'm now a cuckold and a loser. It will take me time to regain my self-esteem and get my man card back, but I will do it. As for the wife, if she needs someone else so much, she will soon be able to have as much fun as she wants. I copied and pasted this onto my Facebook page, turned off my computer, and crawled into my new bed. I woke up Sunday morning, and my kids and I gave up going to church. I will run into these people in due time. Instead, I took the kids to McDonald's for breakfast. They had a play area, and I let them play until they were exhausted. We got home at 2 o'clock and started going to my grandparents' house for dinner like every Sunday. Linda rushed out of the bedroom, complaining about why I didn't wake her up earlier, as now we'd be late. Do you really think your mom cares if we're late? It doesn't matter. Why should she delay dinner just because of us? The trip to her parents was silent, not even the children made a sound. When we arrived at the door, she double-checked to make sure we all looked presentable, then knocked. Her mom opened the door with a shocked look on her face. "Are you okay, Mom? Is Dad okay? We didn't think you'd come today. Shouldn't you be with your boyfriend?" "Mom, I'm married." "I don't have a boyfriend." "That's not what we heard." "Who told you such nonsense?" "My friend Betty told me, she read it on Facebook." "Did she say who started all this nonsense?" "She read it on Jane Freeman's Facebook page." We still didn't believe it, so we read it ourselves. We went to your page, but there was nothing there. I haven't gotten on the computer yet today." "Well, then we went to Jim's page and read his story. So we thought you wouldn't come." "Who is he, a basketball player?" Linda looked like a fish out of water and couldn't say a word. "Actually, Mom, he's a football player." "He's still an idiot," I said. "Are you really going to divorce her?" I just nodded. Then suddenly, Emma exclaimed, and she made out with him in the driveway yesterday afternoon. Linda almost fell. Finally, she said, "Mom, we're going home. We need to talk." We turned around and returned to the car. In the car, she turned and asked Emma, "Why did you say that? You always tell me not to lie." "Mom, you lied, and it was wrong." Linda turned back and didn't say anything else during the ride. When we arrived home, she jumped out of the car and left me to take care of the children. Emma was sobbing, and I told her she had done nothing wrong. When we entered, Linda was nowhere to be seen. I suggested watching their film again, and that calmed them down. I fed them, put them in the bath, then settled down to watch Frozen again. When the movie ended, I put them to bed. As she was getting ready to go to her room, Linda came out of hers and asked if we could talk. I ignored her until this moment. "So, what do you want to talk about? Can we sit in the living room to talk?" "Sure, why not? It won't change anything where we do it." We went into the living room. I sat on the couch, and she was about to sit next to me, so I stood up and moved to the chair. "Jim, I'm still the same as yesterday. Why are you treating me like this? Tell me, Linda, if you're still the same as yesterday, that means you're a lying cheater who had no trouble making a fool of her husband for the whole town. Is this the same person you're talking about?" "Okay, I said it wrong. I meant Friday." "Oh, the one who said she loved me and then left without a word to have fun with some." "Jim, stop with the names and stop making something great look bad, something wonderful. You mean walking away from me, standing at the table waiting for you to return from the toilet with your snake friend, who saw nothing wrong with helping you sneak out the back door with the—" "Jim, check your ego. It's not as bad as you make it out to be. Yes, I left with Mark, and he made me feel good. But now I'm home, and we need to move on. How about you answer a few questions I have?" "Okay, that's a good start. What do you want to know first?" Question 1. Did he use protections? Linda simply lowered her head to the floor. I'll take it as a no. Next question. Did you enjoy that night? Oh God, yes. It was better than I've ever had in my life. She looked as if she was lost in a daydream again. Last question. Why did you even come home? She looked at me as if I had two heads. I came back because I love you, and because I loved you, that's why I'm divorcing you. We've discussed this many times, just you and me and with the group. We all said that if there was ever cheating, it would be the end. It's not fair, Jim. I wouldn't do this to you if you had the chance. That's what's nice about the way you did it, saying I wouldn't do that to you. We'll never know if I'd do the same to you now. You'll just put up with it to prove you're right, never mind how bad you feel. You'll never know what it's like to have a whole room full of strangers watching, some lady asking me to dance, keeping me on the dance floor for half an hour and then dragging me out the back door while you sit there waiting to finish what was to be our special night. You'll never know what it's like to sit with two small children and wait for me to come home the next day. You'll never know, no matter how hard you try to keep the kids from looking out the window. When I got home, one did come there and saw me kissing some stranger in our driveway where anyone could have seen. Judging by the sound of the engine and the way it took off, I'm sure it caught the attention of at least one of our neighbors. You see, Linda, you may get a pat on the back from them, but all I get is a chuckle behind my back. That's why, Linda, I will seek a divorce. I will ask for child custody. Since this is not a no-fault divorce state, I will agree to extensive visitation rights, but you will not be allowed to keep them overnight if I find out that one of your future lovers is in the house. Why didn't you give me a chance to fight for you on Friday? I didn't want you to make a scene and get punched in the face so I could end up leaving with him anyway. Who are you to say that I'll get punched in the face? Come on, Jim, look at you and him. He's twice your size. Sit here. I want you to see something. I stood up and went to my room, then came back with 2 sheets of paper and handed them to her. What is this supposed to be? Read the top of the first page. Okay, so these are Mark's stats. So what? Look at the second page. Okay, these are your stats from the gym. So what? How much does it say he can lift on the bench? Let's see. It says 250. How much do I have? It says 245 pounds. So, you think just because this guy can lift 5 pounds more than me, he'll beat me in a fair fight? Yes, he may be a few inches taller than me, but again, that doesn't mean anything. Listen, Linda, you can't have it all. You chose to make me a fool. Your friend chose to make me the laughing stock of the world by bragging about it on Facebook. Now you can have what you want and do what you want whenever you want, just not here. Jim, I want to spend the rest of my life with you and the kids. You should have thought about this on Friday night. Look, I saw your face when I asked you to leave with me. You had already decided to go with him. The real question, Linda, have you ever thought about the children? Her sudden sigh told me everything. You haven't even thought about the children, even once. God forbid if something had happened to them. How would anyone have contacted you? What would you have done if we weren't here when you finally came home yesterday? The problem here, Linda, is that like all, you didn't think with your head. Well, you lived your fantasy. Now get ready to live your nightmare. I stood up and headed back to my room. Before I got there, I turned around and said, if you're planning on staying in this house with us, you need to go and get tested for STDs and stuff. HIV can take up to 6 months to show up after you've been infected. Not funny, Jim. Mark is a professional footballer. I'm sure they get tested regularly. In case you haven't noticed, his season ended on December 29th, over 3 months ago. Do you still think he's getting tested regularly? Besides, they only test for performance-enhancing pills. I went into my room, closed it under the door, opened my Facebook page, and saw 50 new friend requests, mostly from women. At this point in my life, I had nothing to lose, so I accepted them all as friends. I looked at the reactions to my post, and they were very different. I needed a plan for the future, so I spent the next 2 hours writing down the pros and cons of my new life. Linda and I had an active night life, but my priority now had to be Emma and Tommy. Could I give up an intimate for them? Only time will tell. I had enough money that we could live without Linda's income. It would be tough, but we could manage. If I hadn't had children, I don't know what I would have done. I woke up early. The bed wasn't as bad as I thought, but buying a thicker mattress made all the difference. We usually woke up the kids together, but if we got divorced and I was the only one taking care of them, I'd have to get used to doing everything myself. I woke up both children and got them ready for school, Emma for school and Tommy for preschool. They both stayed at school after school until one of us came to pick them up. They had a lot to do. Breakfast finished, I loaded them into my truck and hit the road. We never saw Linda. When I arrived at work, ridicule and jokes began. There was a soccer ball and a pack of protections on my desk. I decided to put an end to this, so I took the protections and glued them to a piece of paper. Underneath, I wrote, "They didn't use them," and posted it on the information board. I kept the soccer ball to annoy whoever paid for it. When I left my office for a break, the protections were gone, and no one looked me in the eyes. I went to my boss's office and asked if I could talk to her. "How can I help you, Jim?" "Ruth, I'd like to take the next 2 weeks off. I'll finish this week, but I have a lot to sort out. It's been bad, I guess you'd have to be in my shoes to get the whole point." But the idiot just walked up, ignoring everyone at the table except Linda. When he asked her to dance, she didn't hesitate to let go of my hand and take his. She didn't say a word to me, it was as if I didn't exist. When she returned to the table, I asked her to leave with me, and she slipped away to the toilet with one of the ladies at the table. That was the last I saw of her until she came into the house on Saturday afternoon. Emma, our eldest, ran to the window and watched her mother kiss some idiot on her porch. She has no remorse for what she did, and I don't want to live in the shadow of her one-time adventure. I hope the divorce will be initiated, and a new order will be established by then. Jim, we've been discussing the idea of remote work for some of our employees. Essentially, you'll be doing the same thing you do here, just from home. You'll be able to take the kids to school and be with them when they get back. You'll need to come here once a week for a few hours, but they'll be at school at that time. We can come up with something different this summer. Would you be interested in something like that? Ruth, you're a savior. If I weren't married, I would marry you in a heartbeat. Jim, you flatter me, but I think the 20 years I have on you and the fact that Bill wouldn't approve might cause problems. You're pretty up to date, so why don't you take the rest of the day off and do what you need to do, and come back tomorrow, and we'll have your new laptop ready. Thank you, Ruth. You have no idea how grateful I am to you. I won't let you down. I returned to my office, turned everything off, and left. When I arrived home, Linda's car was there, but she wasn't. I went into my room and turned on the computer to start researching the divorce. I did a lot of research and found out that I didn't even need a lawyer if everything was split equally. Custody of the children would be determined by a judge, but that wouldn't happen soon. We may have to go through counseling, but that wouldn't be a problem. I feel mentally well, and my change in job status will allow me to be a full-time caregiver. Everything I read said not to move out of the house, as it could come back to haunt you later. I started acting online and decided to let the tokens fall as they may. The next big problem was money. I went to the bank and withdrew a third of the funds from the account and opened a new one in my name only. Since Linda wasn't there, I couldn't open an account in just her name, but I could open a joint one. After the accounts were opened, I removed my name from the original one. When I got home again, her car was still in the garage, but I didn't see her anywhere. I still had things to do, so I wasn't paying attention to where she might be or what she might be doing. I looked at the time and went out to my truck to pick up the kids. As the garage door began to open, I saw a shiny sports car pull into the yard. Linda saw my face, and I could see her say, "Oh no." You never know how angry you might get until the snake decides to bite a second time. Linda started getting out of the car just as I reached the end of the garage, and neither of them saw me pick up the two hammers. The first one flew straight into the windshield of his car. The second, I smashed his headlights and headed for the driver's door. The fiberglass sides didn't hold up well when I hit the door. Linda had not yet fully exited when he abruptly put the car into reverse to pull out of the driveway. The door hit her, knocking her off her feet, and he almost ran over her. Once he was outside, he suddenly shifted into forward gear to drive away, but not before a second hammer hit the back of the car. He finally took control of the car and sped around the corner. I looked at Linda lying on the ground and realized that her leg was broken. I went out, picked up my hammer, came back, and picked up a second one. I put them away, picked her up, and put her in his truck. While I was taking her to the hospital, I called her mother and asked her to pick up the children. "What happened, Jim?" "Well, Mom," and I told her the story. "Looks like she has a broken leg and who knows what else. If you and Dad can get the kids, I'll get them as soon as I can. Do you want to come to the hospital?" "Not yet. If I have to leave her, I'll call and let you know. If the police show up, then who knows? I love you, no matter what happens." "We love you too, Jim." At the hospital, Linda was still in shock, so I was the only one who could yell. They looked at me suspiciously, as if I had done it, so I decided not to hide it and told them how it all happened. They considered it a crime anyway and wanted to report it to the police. After they took my testimony, they hesitated about what to do. The idiot wasn't here to file a complaint against me, and if they had filed a complaint, the big hero would have gotten in trouble for committing a hit and run. So, they left it alone for now. I gave the hospital my insurance card, and it was essentially reported as a domestic incident. They wanted to keep her overnight in case she had a concussion and gave me a dirty look when I told them they could keep her forever. I went to Linda's parents to pick up my children. I told them which room she was in and then took the kids to McDonald's for dinner. After I put the kids to bed, I went back to Facebook to document my path to loneliness. I wrote, if that wasn't enough for the big football hero today, he decided to take the plunge again. I really don't know how much more I can take before I lose control. Some might say that I threatened him, but all I said was that I couldn't take it anymore. This was not a threat but a statement. Looks like I'll have to fight a war on his territory or he'll never learn his lesson. I woke up the kids on Tuesday, and when they asked when Mom would be home, I told them I wasn't sure but probably soon. When I called to check on her condition, they said it wouldn't be until Wednesday around noon before she could come out. When I returned home with the children, Linda's parents were waiting for us. I invited them inside, and the children went to their rooms to change. "Jim, she looks bad. What are you going to do?" Mom asked. "My boss has changed my work status. I will start working remotely in 3 weeks. I have the next 2 weeks of vacation. I have been researching divorce laws in our state and feel that I can get custody of the children if I give her extensive rights to meetings. I moved all my stuff into a home office, and she can stay as long as she wants, but there will be rules for both of us. If she breaks a rule, she will be kicked out. Her little stunt yesterday will no longer be tolerated. I have divided all our money into 3 parts. She will have her own account and be expected to contribute to the family fund while she lives here. I can't think of anything else. I'm being fair to her, much more than I should be. We agree, son. For what it's worth, she said. Nothing happened between them yesterday. If you want to believe her, that's fine. Just know, I got home at 10:30 a.m. yesterday. I was on the computer until about noon when I went to the bank, and then came home. It was about 3 o'clock when I got out to get in my truck to pick up the kids. I know you're smart enough to know that 4.5 hours is more than enough time to get dirty. Want to see her underwear for more proof? She was returning home just to pick up the children. She didn't expect me to be here. Do I need to say anything else? No, son. You stated your case pretty well. Take care of yourself. They left, and I made the kids dinner and got ready for the long drive. When I arrived on Tuesday, Ruth had outdone herself. She had a Surface Book 3 with a 15-inch touchscreen and an additional 24-inch monitor. I could work from anywhere in the house. I thanked her again. On Wednesday, I picked up a set of clothes for Linda to her home, took them to her room, and then went downstairs to sign her out. I was still surprised that the police didn't come back to pick me up when she was pulled to the side of the road. We still didn't say anything to each other. I brought her home, walked up the stairs, and put her in her bed. It would have been better if she had used my room downstairs, but no. I'll be right back with your lunch. If you need to use the bathroom, here's the sink I picked out for you and some wet wipes, I said. They said you had bruised ribs in addition to a broken leg. I charged your mobile phone, and it's sitting right on your nightstand. I need to get back to work now. Jim, we need to talk. No, Linda. We both know any conversation had to take place before Friday evening. There's nothing you can say right now that could change my mind. Jim, nothing happened on Monday. It was like nothing happened on Friday night. Do you want me to send your underwear to the laboratory so that they can confirm their assumptions? Look, Jim, it was just a mistake. He called and said he wanted to talk about Friday. The situation simply got out of control and will never happen again. You haven't realized yet that I don't care anymore. You said Friday has passed and now it's Monday. What will happen next time? Then why did you react so strongly? You just don't understand. First, you disrespected me on Friday night. Then you disrespected your family by allowing him to take you home and kiss you in front of your daughter and everyone else. Then on Monday, you went out with him again. You could have just told him no over the phone. Right now, if he said jump, you would do it. The funny thing is that instead of protecting you, he ran away, almost running over you. How long do you think you would have been lying in the driveway if I hadn't taken you to the hospital, Linda? I don't have anything left in the tank for you. I'll take you back to whatever the new normal will be someday. If you plan to stay here, you'll have to keep paying your share. But if you don't want to pay, then we can either move you back to your parents or anywhere else you want. I went downstairs and made her soup, a sandwich, and a glass of tea. I brought it to her, held it up, and opened the curtains to let some light into the room. Linda, I have to tell you, I asked you to get an STD test while you were there. The results will be sent here in a little more than a week. Until we get the results, I don't want you to kiss any children. I'll tell the kids it's because of your ribs. I turned around and went to leave. I heard her sobs as I closed the door. When I left, I knew that Mr. Mark Lavalier would have to pay one way or another. When I went to get the kids, I told them that Mommy was home but they needed to refrain from jumping on her until her ribs healed. When I got home, I took them to her room and saw that she was using the chamber pot. So, while they were talking, I put it away. I returned the tray of food to the kitchen and poured her some fresh tea and a bottle of water. I told the kids to call me when they were ready for snacks and left the room. Back in my room, I opened my Facebook page. I had a private message from a guy I became friends with a couple of days ago that said, he did the same to me. If you are planning to do something, can I help? I answered, I'll keep you in mind. Sitting there, I went over everything that had happened. The main thing I found out was how easily the orchestra conductor adjusted to the fact that the man needed to carry out his little seduction. Was she Pierre's hunting ground? If so, how often did he use it? I sent another question to my new friend on Facebook. If you don't mind, can I ask how he did the same to you? I left the question fairly vague in case it was just someone looking to feel part of a group. He answered faster than I expected. I was with my wife and a couple of friends. It was the Friday after New Year's. My wife looks good but not stunning, however, that night she was one of the best there. She went to dance with him and never returned to the table. He returned home on Saturday afternoon. As they left the club, the rest of our group told me how lucky I was that he chose my wife. Life at home has not been very good since then. I asked, "May I ask where this happened?" "Sheep Pierre." I replied, "If I think of something, I will contact you," so there seemed to be a pattern and a hunting ground. I decided to check it out again this Friday. I looked at my watch and realized it was time to start cooking dinner. I went upstairs and found both children sleeping on either side of her. It was very painful to think about what she did to our family. The rest of the week was just a repeat of the previous day. Friday night, I put the kids to bed, went to my room, changed into one of my suits, and headed to Sheep Pierre. I paid the entrance fee and entered, noting the time. It was 9:30 p.m. He sat at the same table as the last time I was here, carrying himself as if he owned the place. When the orchestra came out to play, he stood up, crossed the room with everyone watching, and approached a beautiful lady, repeating the same trick as that night. He took her to the dance floor, and it was as if everyone else had just made way for them. I watched the orchestra conductor, and just as I thought, when the stupid nodded his head, the next two songs were slow. There was a whisper in her ear, a nod to the orchestra conductor, and as they left the dance floor when the music ended, from where I was sitting, I could see them both. He grabbed his coat and went out the back door. She grabbed her purse and headed to the toilet, never to return. I stood up, threw a 20 on the counter, and left. The weekend went well for me and the kids. We watched a lot, and yes, you guessed it, Frozen. I checked on Linda every 4 hours or so without saying more than was necessary. I heard her phone ringing from time to time, but it was no longer a concern until Dee showed up on the doorstep on Sunday afternoon. "What do you want, Jim?" This is no way to talk to a friend. "I came to see Linda." "Well, we have two problems. First, I told you I don't want to see you anymore, or I might hurt you. Second, Linda still can't move, and I won't let you in, so get back under that dirt you crawled out from before I threw you off my property. Jim, you'll have to forgive us sooner or later before this hatred consumes you. You know I never had these problems until you decided to destroy my marriage, so get out of my territory," and I slammed the door in her face. I immediately went up to Linda's room and said, "I don't care if you want to remain friends with these traitors, but if you invite them here again, it must be to help you pack your things." Linda looked at me and said, "But Jim, I'm lonely. I need someone grown up to talk to." "Then call your mom and dad and have them come and move you in. If they want to let these people into their home, that's their choice, Jim." "Why are you acting like this, Linda? Have you ever wondered what the statue of the goddess of justice symbolizes?" "Honestly, no." "Well, you should. Maybe then you'd understand. Why don't you just tell me, Mr. Arrogant?" "Okay, listen carefully. First, she has a blindfold over her eyes, which symbolizes that everyone is treated equally before the law, regardless of your status. Next, we go down to the statue. There, you will find a snake under a book under her foot, which indicates that justice will be applied to evil, as stated in the Constitution. The book on which it stands next is her sword in her left hand, which symbolizes punishment. It can be swift and final by law. The last stop is the scales of evidence. Evidence must be weighed and balanced based on its merits. Linda, you and I have tipped the scales. They won't be balanced. We won't be able to continue. Before you say anything, yes, I could go out and have fun with someone to try and get revenge, but that wouldn't work. You have to feel the same pain as me for it to work. But you don't regret what happened. Even after he sent you to the hospital. It was your fault, Jim. If you hadn't threatened him with the hammer, this never would have happened. And if he had been courageous enough, this wouldn't have happened. Linda, all this nonsense is your fault and his. Deal with it. I have divorce papers. Everything has already been drawn up, and you can go on and do whatever you want, just not with the children. You want to keep this bunch of cheap, shitty friends? Okay. Not here. The day will come when you realize what you have done, but you will find that it is already too late. Tell your friends never to come to my house again. On Wednesday, she was at home for a week. A letter arrived from the hospital saying she had gonorrhea. When I gave her the letter, she almost fainted. I called the doctor to find out what she needed to do for treatment. She will have to take a single dose of 250 milligrams of ceftriaxone intramuscularly and 1 gram of azithromycin orally. They said I could pick it up at the hospital pharmacy. Because she had a broken leg, I loved all the points this scored. I messaged my new friend on Facebook and told him they should go and get tested. He responded, thanking me. Now, I was more determined to get revenge on this. On Friday night, I returned to the club. When he separated the sheep from the flock, I got out, got into my pickup truck, and drove to the back of the club. There was a big caddy sitting right next to the door. I turned into an alley and waited for him to come out. A woman who looked like Dee appeared, and he walked away with me following. I stayed far enough away and let 1 or 2 cars get between us so he wouldn't know he was being followed. When he pulled into the driveway of the house at the top end, I just kept walking. I turned around and, returning to him, wrote down the address. I drove home, went into the county registry, and entered the numbers. When I looked it up, it belonged to some charity. He was listed as the general director. The weekend passed without any negative events, and on Monday, after dropping off the children, I drove back past that house. I parked on the street a few houses away where other cars were parked and walked back. Just in case, I went to the front door to see what kind of security he had. Why do wealthy people living in prestigious areas not feel the need for security? I knocked, and no one came to the door. I walked around the house and checked it. I calculated the distance from his sliding glass back door to the front door. I found where his power supply was, then went back to my truck and drove home. As I was driving home, I passed a co-op store. A sudden idea came to my mind. I drove up and went to a store that sold electric fence parts. When all was said and done, I spent $600. I bought everything I needed to wire his front door and sliding glass door from the street. Then, I stopped at Harbor Freight for a buzzer and a very bright flashlight, and I was all set. Now, everything depended on Friday evening. As the week passed, Linda seemed to become increasingly depressed, the price you pay when you want to play. I never stopped caring about her. I just didn't go out of my way to talk to her. I only answered her questions when asked or when I asked her what she wanted to eat. I called her boss on Tuesday after the accident and told her the latest news. When I brought her home, she had 6 weeks of sick leave, but she wouldn't be back until 8. She'd have to treat it as unpaid or vacation. But at least, they will keep her job for this period. Finally, Friday arrived. Everything was in the back seat of my truck. When I left the house around 9 o'clock, this time I didn't have to go inside. I just had to wait in the back. As I sat there, I thought back to the last few Fridays. Lavalier seemed to pick his victim around the same time. The orchestra returned at 10 p.m. The dancing lasted about half an hour, and then they left. So predictably, like clockwork, he left at 10:30 p.m., followed by her. It was hard to see at that distance in the darkness, but somehow she looked familiar. The 20-minute drive to his house, parked outside in the driveway, and walked in through the front door, all too easy. While I was sitting in my truck, the light came on in the front bedroom. Now I knew where he did his deeds. I changed into my black shirt and pants and pulled the full balaclava mask over my head. The curtains were open, so anyone who came could see right in. I did this with my Nikon camera with night flash and high-speed film. I took many pictures of him with his lady. The lights went out around 1:30 a.m., so I waited until 2 a.m. to begin my attack. I covered the back of my truck with a cover so the tail lights wouldn't be visible. When I pulled into his driveway a little bit, his grass was as soft as I had hoped and damp, making it easier to hammer in the piece of rebar. I unrolled 16-gauge wire to his front door and cut it off, then wrapped it around the door handle. Back at the truck, I hooked it up to a Datamars 2-joule energizer. I ran a second wire to the back door and connected that as well. Taking the ground wires, I connected them to the fixture and battery. I returned and turned off the main switch, leaving the house in complete darkness. Back at the truck, I grabbed the speaker and my 100,000 lumen flashlight and stood about 15 feet from the window. At exactly 2 a.m., I turned on the flashlight, pointed it at the window, and said into the loudspeaker, "Come out, you son of a, bring my wife out here right now. I'll beat you so bad that people will see what you're really made of." Yes, it was just a bluff. It wasn't my wife there, it was the police chief's wife. They both woke up disoriented and stumbled their way to the front door to get away from the light. I could hear them hitting the walls because they couldn't turn on the lights, because there was no electricity. Someone believed to be Lavalier grabbed the front door handle and screamed in shock. I heard another scream, presumably from the back door, then a loud sound of glass breaking. I ran back to the truck and threw the speaker and flashlight into the back of the truck, disconnected the battery, and pulled out the wires and fittings, then threw them in, too. I took my stun gun and went to the back door to turn the breaker back on. When I got there, Lavalier was without clothes and lying on the grass, holding his leg. The lady was without anything and lying motionless on the patio, covered in cuts. I walked up to Lavalier and said, "You really are a pathetic loser, aren't you?" Lying without clothes on the wet grass, I pressed a stun gun to his groin and held the trigger all the way. After loading all my belongings into the truck, I drove home, but not without calling 911 from a burner phone to report a disturbance at the home of Mark Lavalier, a local hero. The news Saturday morning was full of reports of an incident at Mark Lavalier's home. Paramedics found him and his girlfriend in the backyard. The investigation revealed that, for some reason, instead of using a chair, Mr. Lavalier threw his girlfriend through the glass door to get out, then cut a tendon in his leg on the glass while trying to get through the hole. Both were in the hospital at the time. Linda watched in horror as the news continued. She thought she might have a future with that idiot, now she knew better. Throughout the day, there were reports his leg injury would end his career. Mark Lavalier would be held for attempted murder. I went on Facebook, and my new friend sent me a message simply saying thank you. Linda, like the fool she had become, tried to commit suicide because she was sure it was all over. Her big problem was that she forgot that we were home, too. I called 911, and they arrived in time to save her. She spent the next 5 weeks in a mental hospital, lost her job, and when she was discharged, she moved back in with her parents. Our state had no action on a family bond claim, so a local attorney decided to file a class action lawsuit against Mark Lavalier and his charity for mistreating someone's wife. Yes, I know such an action does not exist. Until now, more than 200 men joined him. No, I didn't do that. I didn't need anyone to ask me questions. When it came to the judge, he awarded each side $100,000 plus attorney fees. Mark Lavalier's charity goes bankrupt. All of his personal belongings were sold, leaving him with about $110,000. Since he could no longer play football, he packed up what little he had left and rode a Greyhound bus back to his hometown and his parents' basement. I got custody of the children, so when the divorce was finalized, the only time I saw Linda was when I dropped off the children or picked them up. My life away from home only happened this weekend. I wasn't looking for a replacement, so I had a constant series of casual connections. It seems Linda went out a few times with the same group, but when 2 men started trying to date her alone, it led to 3 more divorces. Linda's parents told her, "If you're going to act like this, find somewhere else to live." With the low-paying job she had, it was better to give up than to move. One of the divorces was between Dee and Dave after Dee gave him gonorrhea. Looking back over the past year, my biggest regret was that I didn't act faster that night. I should have just grabbed her hand and told him no. I should have pushed Dee and Jane's hands away and taken her off the dance floor. I should have looked for her that night and set his house on fire, burned it down. But what I got was the pleasure of ruining his life. In the end, I think about Linda all the time, but until she realizes what she did wrong, we will just be 2 ships going in different directions. As for next Valentine's Day, I think I'll just stay home with the kids and watch Frozen and now Frozen 2. What do you think of our story today? It seems to me that on such a significant holiday for lovers to find out that your wife is cheating on you is the worst thing. What's your opinion? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next video.